Hi, I'm Dan, and today I'm going to go over the new V2 components in Elements. Now, this is primarily aimed at existing Element Beta users because they will be using the V1 components, and it's really for you guys to show you a little bit about the V2 components, how they work, and how you can get up and running using these. Because it is a very different process to working with the V1 components. So I won't go into in-depth detail about everything. This is more meant as a quick primer so you can get up and running and then ask questions on the forum, check the documentation, etc. So I've got a blank document here, but before I dive into this, I want to go to an old document, and this old document is showing me that I'm using some V1 components, and this is what your document will look like when you go to the Node browser. Your site should look the same because we've included the V1 components, and the only difference is we've appended V1 to the name. So this way, if you're converting your site over, you can kind of look and see, am I still using any V1 components? And then you can work at replacing these over time. So with that out of the way, let's get back here, because all of these are V2 components, and you can't tell just by looking at the list here. It's only when you drop them into the page. I can see that it says V2 and all the settings are different, and I've got a little help button here as well. So the way to tell if it's a V1 or V2 component is, let me just go to a different page here. I can highlight an object and I can check the version number there, so it says V2, or I can look in here and see if it has V1 by it. So when I go to this old site, I can see it says V1 here, and it also has V1, the little text here, so I know this is the old container. So that's rather important if you're migrating existing sites and you're getting kind of muddled up with what's a new component, what's an old component. The V1 components will not show in the sidebar because you need to migrate your site to V2. V1 components are going away. We're ditching them. They will be removed from a future build of Elements. V2 components, these are the new ones. These are the future. This is what we're going to go public with. So you need to migrate to these. We know it's a pain, but these are so drastically different from the old one. There was no way to seamlessly migrate. And I know it's no consolation, but we did warn about this, that things might change and you might need to rebuild your site. But yeah, this should be the last time you have to do that, the one and only time. But let's dive into this and see how they work, because it is a much better system. I'm going to go to a blank page here. And so I've just dropped a container on the page. So you get an empty page, drop a container. Works very much like the old container, just with some new settings. We've obviously got a link here. A container can be a grid or flex item, and I'll come back to this in a minute. We've got the usual settings like content layout. These are set out differently. They are closer to how Tailwind sets them out in the documentation. A lot more powerful as well. We've built more power into here. So you might be intimidated at first when you start using this, but please don't be. It takes a little while to get up to speed, but it's much better. And I know this because I've been using it for the last 3-4 weeks, maybe even longer, as we've iterated on it. Takes a bit of getting used to, but it's much better, more powerful, and it's like, oh, can I do this? Yes, the answer is always yes, whereas before it was a bit iffy. So these are a lot better. So we've got sizing there, spacing, and you've got all these transition effects, filters, and I'll touch on some of these things, but let's kind of build up a bit of a site. So I've got a container and I'm thinking I'm going to put a header up here. So I want to change my sizing, and currently the width is set to full. That's fine. I could change it to one of these other options. You can check the documentation for these, what all the different options mean. But my height, I could set it to full, and that will fill to the whatever we drop in here. Or I could set it to the screen, and you can see it centered our content. But I want to set it to a set height. Now I pick theme, and I can pick a size from the theme. Or I just hit this button, and then I can set exactly what I want. And this supports CSS properties, so I can do something as simple as pixels, like 300 pixels, or I could say 50% vertical height, and that will do 50% of the browser window. I'm just going to set this to 450 px, and that's got us our header there. Background is where you would expect it. I've got a background here. Now with these, there's a lot more power because we've added hover to a lot of these effects, which we didn't have before. So now on the background, if I wanted to, let's set it to a color. I could have a start and end color so that when I hover into it, it animates. So we can do stuff like this now, which we couldn't do before. And this applies to things like buttons. So you can get and images, you can get some really nice effects here. We just want it static. And I can change to an image. Let's see. I've got some images here, which are quite nice. Drop those in. Same as you're used to before. We can just drop these in. And you've got some options to change the positioning and the stretching of it. We can do gradients as well, to and from. And then a third step there. So you can have a 3-point gradient. All good stuff. And again, that works with hover. So that's really good. Background overlay, so if we wanted to just put a little overlay on the background, we can do, or you could even overlay another image onto this. You can layer things up or do hovers, so that's pretty cool. So we're just going to leave it, let's go for black, and we're just going to darken it down a little bit. And so these work, you should be quite at home with these. So I've got a heading and I can just put this in here, change the color and background. So this is all quite straightforward stuff you'll be used to. Make that 7x. So welcome. But with these things, you'll notice I've got these same settings as I have on the background. I've got layout, sizing, spacing, transition effects, filters. So this is really good. A lot of these are shared, so it might feel like a lot to learn, but really it's really not, because a lot of these properties are shared. So I already know about the sizing, and spacing's the same. You know, I can enable that, and you can see margin and padding. And if I go to the container and I enable spacing, margin and padding, it's exactly the same. So this is really, really nice. And it's the same thing with effects. I can, let's do a filter on this. Or in fact, what would probably be nicer, we can do transforms, and that's to change the scale of it. So this is static at the moment, so I can just change this statically, which is nice. You know, if I just want to rotate my my text a little bit, kind of jazzy, or I can translate it, which is to move it up and down. And this applies to all the objects. Again, it's like a button. You know, if I drop a button in here and think, oh, I want to tilt that button or scale it a little bit, you know, I can do that, and 10, and it's rotated. So this is really cool. So if I wanted to, I can build quite a wonky website very easily, and I know how these controls work. But we can also do this on hover. So it's not particularly useful on, well, let's set that to 0. I want it at the end. I can set that to 10, and when I hover into it, it rotates, which isn't particularly useful or not an effect I want. So we'll leave that. But it is an effect that I would quite like on the button. I don't want it to rotate, but what I do want to happen is when I hover into it, it scales. So I can go 120, and now when I go into that button, it hovers, which is really cool. And I can stack these things up. So I could go into filters, and I could change the drop shadow on it. And again, the same static and hover. I can set the states I want. So this is, hopefully you're getting a sense that this is, once you learn it, you can apply this to all the things, and it starts becoming second nature. One thing to note on the filters, transforms, etc., you can set the overstate. And at the moment I've got it to self, but you can set it to the parent. And that means the container is the parent. So when I go into the parent, the effect will trigger. So this is the same for our text here. I could set it to parent, and I could set the hover effect to rotate by 10. So now when I go into the heading, into the container, these things animate. So this is really flexible and really powerful and really easy to have these effects around the place. I'm showing you very specific things here, but there's lots of things you could do with this. I'm just showing the obvious stuff. So let me set that back to static. So that's, and I'll set this button to only hover on self. So this is really cool. We've got a banner here. Let's say order now, because I could imagine this is for a website selling biscuits, if you like. And you could click on this, order now. And so that's nice. We've already built this up really quick, but I wanted to show you how the grid and flex items work. And I'll show you the flex items here. I'm going to drop a flex into the container, and you can see I've got a container, flex, heading and button. And previously you would add flex items into here, but you don't need to do that anymore for simple effects, or for simple flex boxes, I suppose. So I've dropped my 2 items into the flex, and that allows me to change the layout and the gap. So like the horizontal gap here, which is a common thing you want to do, a vertical gap, to set the spacing between objects, because the more of these I had in here, you want that spacing to be the same. So there we go. We can just set it to auto. So now that spacing is being automatically applied on these items. So let's get rid of that. And we could set that to 3. That's on the horizontal. I want the vertical. Set it to 3 or 5. So this is really easy. So any items I add into this flex will kind of become flex items, like very standard flex items. Now we can do more advanced features. If you wanted more advanced flex box options, what you would do, you would drop a container into here, and so I'd add it there, and then I'd drop my heading into here, and then on this box I would tell it can be either a flex box or a grid item, and I'd tell it I want it to be a flex item. And now I get the controls for a flex item, and that can be standard or advanced, which is, the scope of this is too much for this video. We'll need an in-depth video to go over these, but this is really, really powerful and allows you to do anything like a flex box can do. It's just really, all the options are there that you could need. So that's kind of the advanced options there, but I'll show you on grid, which you probably will want to use. Oh, let's reset the order there. Let's get another thing going here. Right, so I've got I've got another container, and let's set the sizing here, and I want it to be the height of the screen, or well, let me put it, let's just do it custom for the moment. 500px. So I'm going to drop a grid into here, and our grid is set to 4 columns, and let's drop an image in, and our image is going to take up one of those columns automatically, so we don't need to add a grid item and then an image, because that adds a lot of cruft. We just don't need that. Same with the flex. So here now this image is taking up 1 column of 3. Let me add some more of these images in. If I copy and paste these, you can see I've got 4 images, and they span across there because we've got 4 columns. And if I set it to 12, this would fit 12 images across there. So this is really, this is a nice way to work very quick. Let's set that to 4. And again, I could set the vertical spacing. I could set the horizontal spacing. It would help if I understood my horizontal and vertical. So we've got these, and that's great. But you might say, well, I want this first image to stretch across two columns. How do I do that? And this is where the box or container comes in. You can use either of these. The container has more options, is more flexible. The box is just like a wrapper, so they're really good to use if you don't want any, you don't need any too much fancy stuff on them. So I'll drop the box into my grid and I'll put the image in the box. And remember, this box can be anything. It can be just a wrapper, or it can be a grid item or a flex item. And in this case, I want it to be a grid item. And it's automatically set to 6 there. I don't want that. If I set it to 1, then it behaves just how it did before, it's just taking up 1 space. But like I said, I want this to take up 2 grid items. So I can move that out. And now it's taking up 2 of the grid items for us. And let me just switch that to 2 as well, so we can see what's going on there. Yeah, so now it's taking up 2 of the columns, and that's really nice. Let's get rid of the image, and I'm just going to put some text in there. So this text here is taking up 2 columns because of the box, and I could move that back down to 1. We'll just put that on auto. So that's, that's how you would do grid items if you want more of that control to say how much the, I can set that to 3, and you can see the boxes pop down to the next line because they can't fit on there anymore. And that, if I set that to 6 and I go back to our grid, it now, I've now set, we've got 12 columns, and I've set this to take up 6, and then we've got another 6 columns here that I could use. So it's really flexible. You can do some fantastic layouts, and you can keep things as simple or as complex as you want. So that hopefully that gives you a little overview on how the grid works. And if you're wondering where the grid items are, you can just add a container in here. And that is, let me open the type. No, not that project. Let me open the architect project. That's what I'm doing in this project here, I think, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so I've got a grid, and I've got these grid items. These are wrappers inside here, so I get more control over them. I'm setting a background image there. But yeah, so you can use these as grid items. It's really flexible, whereas down here on this grid, on this grid, I'm just using flex boxes to lay out these in the grid. And that just means it makes it really simple to change how many of those I'm displaying on how many columns I'm displaying there. So we can set that back to 3. I hope that makes sense. This is a bit of a quick video because I wanted to kind of give you a quick heads up on how these kind of work, and for you to be able to get going with building a new site on these. So some of them are similar to before. They're just all different settings down here, and like I said, they are, even this menu has these spacing, transitions, effects, and background, and the background has static and hover. So all these things are the same. So you can even do hover effects on your background of your menu, or transforms. I could get it to I can get the menu to rotate when I hover into it. Not that I'd want to do this on quite here, but you can see that rotates. It's really, really flexible stuff. So have a play around with it, see what you think. If you've got any questions, do ask on the forum, and we're there to help you. And there will be bugs in this because this is the first beta of the V2, but we will fix them quickly. So all your feedback will get these fixed up. And if you want to know how more about each one of these things, how they work, go over to the manual. And I've got these common controls that we're working on. Let me just show you. They're in components, common controls here. And you can go through these and see how you can learn, more about effects, how the effects work, or what the transitions do. So you can go in there and learn more about each bit. As I said in the Dev Diary video, the manual isn't finished, but this is the kind of thing we're working on every week. A few times a week I'm doing more videos to put in here and write in the documentation. Now that we're finalizing this stuff, we can finally do the documentation, so that will rapidly grow. And if you've got questions, ask on the forum, and those probably will be the ones I'll hit next, the ones that you guys are asking about. So that was a very, very quick primer to some of the new stuff in here. We'll do more of a deeper dive on each of the components and stuff like that based on your feedback and what you need to know. But hopefully this is enough to get started with. Thank you for watching this one, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers. Bye.